Hey guys, Matt Allen here. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin'. Today we're talking about the top baits for bass fishing in January. I love fishing in January because of the opportunity to catch giant fish. You don't always get a lot of bites this time of year, but it just seems like the bites you get are the right bites. Besides that, the lake is incredibly peaceful. Most of the time when I get out on the water this time of year, I don't see a lot of boat traffic, and I enjoy that. So despite the cold, this is a phenomenal time of year to be out on the water. Now, there are a handful of key baits that we use to consistently catch fish. And there's actually more than you would expect. We're not narrowed down to just one or two things that will catch fish, despite the frigidly cold water. There are still a variety of ways to catch them. To kick this thing off, let's start with the slow moving baits. Let's start with one that's for the guy who just wants to get bit, right? You're out there, it's cold, and you don't want to blank. One of the best things that you can throw is a Ned rig. The Ned rig, day in and day out, super slow fish. Just barely move it, let it soak, barely move it. It'll just get bites this time of year. I grabbed a couple here for you. This one from Z-Man, the Finesse TRD. This one from X-Zone, it's called the Ned Zone. But you'll notice a trend here. There's that Ned Zone. Both of these baits have a bunch of purple in them. Just a quick tip for you. Throwing a Ned rig is an awesome option this time of year. But if you want to really dial it in, you want to get more bites, there's something about that purple. The next time you're out there, if you've caught a few fish, you want to see if maybe you can take it to the next level, take that green pumpkin off, put a purple one on, and you might be surprised what will happen. I just have a lot of confidence in purple in my slow moving baits this time of year. Now, for the guy who you want to slow fish, I get it, but you want an opportunity to catch more of those big fish, because after all, that's usually why we're out there in the wintertime. If you want to step it up from the Ned rig, your best option is the football jig. The football jig is so deadly this time of year. Notice that color. This is the Dirty Jigs Finesse football. That color is called Super Matte Brown. Brown and purple. Little green pumpkin on the trailer. But that pairing right there, flat, catches them for me. Again, I have a lot of confidence in purple in those baits that I'm slow dragging on the bottom, where fish really have time to sit and look at them. They just work. And then again, it's the Finesse football, so a lighter wire hook, which allows us to go to lighter line. This time of year, those fish may spend a lot of time staring at that jig. We might just be slow pulling and letting it sit. Slow pull, let it sit. The more time they have to look at it, the more that heavy line might be a problem. So by going to a Finesse football, lighter wire hook, we're able to go to lighter line as well to get more bites. Now, the complete other end of the spectrum, let's talk about some of the really fun stuff, because despite it being January, despite water temps being brutal cold, air temps being brutal cold too, I'm going to stick my hands in my pockets here. Despite all of that, bass will still react if you know how to trigger that reaction out of them. There's a handful of baits that can do it, and we can't talk about all of them today, but the number one for Tim and I is the speed crank. Taking a crankbait and burning it on a 7-to-1 to 8-to-1 reel. The key is baits that have a very tight action, baits that have very unique sound profiles, and then very natural colors. Color is key for doing this. The concept here, and I'll link both of these, I'll link all this stuff in the video description for you, and I'll link it in the order I'm talking about it, so you don't have to pay attention. The links will take you straight to Tackle Warehouse, where you can see the exact colors, all those things, to make it really simple. But the idea behind a speed crank is that that bait right there, this is the River to Sea Tactical DD75. Tim and I designed this bait. This one is the Megabass Deepex 300. Both are phenomenal for what we're talking about right here. The idea here is that you can take that bait, even in the coldest water, and just absolutely burn it. Burn, 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 pause. Burn, 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 pause. When that bait is flying past those fish and then you pause it, it's like a cat and mouse game. They'll take off after that thing. When it flies by, if it's a dull, natural color, they don't get a good look at it, they'll just react and they'll shoot after it. And then when you're burning and you pause, that thing stalls right in their face and they just come nose to nose with it. And it's amazing, even in 37, 38, 39 degree water, they will absolutely blast that thing. So if you are out in the cold of winter, you're freezing and you've had enough of just sitting there with the shivers trying to hold the Ned rig still, you will be amazed to find out that they will hammer a speed crank, and it tends to be the really big ones that do it. Now, the difference between those two baits, the Tactical DD75 will go a little bit deeper. The Deepex 300 is a little bit finessier. Both can be a really good option this time of year. Next up is the A-Rig. When the A-Rig came out, we all discovered how powerful a school of bait fish can be, right? This, again, is a rig that Tim and I designed. This is the Tactical Mini Flex. We designed this with Hog Farmer Bait Company. So they build them. It's a 6-wire rig, 3 dummy baits on top, 3 hooked baits on the bottom. When it's set up properly like this, you will never have a fish hit these dummies. They always hit the hooked baits. It's amazing how effective that is. So again, this is the Mini. And then if things just seem to be tough on your lake, isn't this an awesome way to store these? It's amazing. If things just really seem to be tough, this is our Tactical Micro. So we have the Mini and we have the Micro. This you can throw on just about anything. I've thrown it on bait finesse rods. I've thrown it on spinning rods. You can throw it on, just a regular medium to even a medium heavy if you want to. The Mini is not too large either. This is still not a full-size A-Rig. You can throw this on any medium heavy to heavy rod that you own. You don't need special gear for this stuff. But the Micro in particular, if you know how effective an A-Rig is, but you don't like throwing them because they're heavy and cumbersome and they're just not that much fun, the Micro can turn all of that around for you. The Micro is so light, you can just underhand, backhand, pitch it around. The fish will clobber that thing, and it's none of the things about A-Rigs that we don't like. It's all the good stuff. They react to an entire school of fish. The first big one I caught on a Micro inhaled the entire rig. It had all 3 hooks inside of its mouth. It literally ate the entire school of bait fish. It's just awesome. Now, 2 more options for you. I'm just blazing through this today, keeping it really simple. The next one is going to be Strolling. Strolling, the jig and minnow, mid strolling, bottom strolling. There's 50 different names. The Damiki rig. There's so many different names for this style of fishing. But essentially taking a soft plastic on a jig head and shaking that thing through the water column. It exploded. It's not new at all. It exploded with forward-facing sonar, but you do not need forward-facing to be able to stroll. You can throw this thing at everywhere that you would have thrown a 2.8 Kitech or anything else that you would throw. Throw it out, essentially throw it out, let it go to bottom, then pop it up off the bottom, and then very gently shake while you reel. Like a swim bait, but with a little shake added to it, which is pretty easy when your hands are cold. They'll kind of shake on their own. But seriously, that's all there is to it. Now, last winter, this is from Hog Farmer. This is their spunk shad. This is the little 3-inch spunk shad. Last winter, this bait didn't exist. We were throwing the 3.5-inch spunk shad, which is, in terms of body size, double the size of this thing. And the whole time we wished there was a smaller one, and now there is. So this is a 1/8 ounce Dirty Jigs guppy head, and that's the 3-inch Hog Farmer Spunk Shad. Very thin body, long, thin tail. You get this awesome little rock out of it. It's very natural. And those fish that are lethargic, that don't want to eat, when that thing comes over the top of them, they just vacuum it up. It catches the same fish that eat little paddle tail swim baits, but they've been seeing paddle tails for more than a decade. This is still new, and they absolutely react to this thing. Next one would be the Graph Shads. The Graph Shads by Z-Man is a very unique bait here for strolling. It's a line through, so the line goes through the head, comes out the belly, and then you tie to this little line tie on the belly. I don't know if you guys can see it or not, but again, I'll link it in the video description. You click that link to Tackle Warehouse, you'll see blown up pictures of it, you'll understand. But it's a line through to a belly tie. As a result, the bait is totally stable in the water. It sits perfectly upright and perfectly level, and it looks just like a shad. Now, the thing with this bait is I have done the most damage when I'm barely moving it. I just give it the subtle little movements, little bumps. None of this hard shaken stuff that we would do in the summer, just barely moving. It relies heavily on realism, but they eat it. I have caught some really good fish this time of year on that bait right there. And then last but not least is metal baits. What do I mean by a metal bait? Blade baits and spoons, particularly a jigging spoon. This guy right here from Nichols licensed from Blade Runner, the Duh Spoon. And as a result of that licensing, you can now get a Duh Spoon that comes with the swivel already on it, with a beautiful trailer hook already on it, all dialed in. You just open the pack and you fish that thing. At the other end of the spectrum, we have the blade bait. This is the Demiki Vault. Standard for me would be the 1/2 ounce in the Vault. In the Blade Runner, I'll throw both the 3/4, which is what this is, and the 1 3/4, which is a little bit bigger. But both of these baits we're going to fish very subtly on the bottom. So typically a jigging spoon, the idea here is you drop it on a semi-slack line and it'll pendulum to bottom. And in the fall, we'll rip that thing up and then let it free fall back to bottom. But by now, when the water's really cold, all I do with this thing is just barely lift it up off the bottom at all. So hop it up just a little bit and it'll just get a flutter or two. That's it. You can even, in the coldest water, just flip-flop it on the bottom. It sounds so silly, but it works so well. Now, you do need to either be out on a dock or on a boat to do this style of fishing. You can't cast this out from shore and think you're going to do that. You'll hang it up. But if you can get over the top of the fish and just barely work this bait, they react to it. It's almost hard for me to understand why they react to it as well as they do, but they do. They crush these things. And then same deal with that Demiki, that Vault. We'll just slow pull it on bottom. It'll vibrate. So think of it as a more natural, a more subtle lipless crankbait. So when you pull it, it'll vibrate, but it has no sound, and it'll settle back to bottom. So you just pull it, let it vibrate, set it down, vibrate, down. That's all we do with that thing, and they club that thing. It's incredible how well those metal baits can work in the really cold water. So from one end of the spectrum, from a Ned rig and a jig, to getting a reaction with an A rig or a speed crank, to then really finessing but still moving with your metal baits or strolling, you have a lot of really good options to catch fish this time of year. Again, I'll link everything in the video description. I'll give you our favorite colors for every single one. So if you want to try something, if something stands out to you, you'll know exactly what colors Tim and I would be using. Hopefully that will help you with your confidence as well as you give it a try. But this is a great time of year to catch a great big bass. Don't be afraid to get out there in the cold. Bundle up, cover up, and go catch a big one. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you soon.